Hello, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to be talking about the Libran full moon of the 8th of April at 3:34 a.m. at Greenwich Mean Time GMT in London. This is going to be a deep dive, so I'm not just going to focus on the event itself. I'm going to obviously feature the characteristics of the Libra full moon, which is obviously very much about people, it's about balance. And the sun, of course, is in the opposite sign, which is Aries, which is all about individual expression, initiation. So I will look at how those two things balance out. But what I want to do is to bring the whole story together to see where the other planets are on this event, and therefore what the fuller impact is going to be on us all over the next 2 weeks. But before I get into this in detail, I would like to thank you very much for joining me. If you would kindly subscribe or share or comment, I interact with all comments. I really welcome your opinions and your thoughts. This is something that I think is very important. But also, I'd like to just tell you that you can subscribe to my monthly magazine by clicking on the link beneath this video, my regular astrological updates, and also your free daily horoscope. Also, if you'd like to have a one-to-one personal consultation with me, it would be an absolute honour to work with you. So here we go, let's look at the wheel. So the sun is at 18 degrees, obviously the moon is at 18 degrees 43. And the interesting thing obviously about this particular Libran full moon is we're in a period of time in society where we're needing to collaborate and cooperate with one another like perhaps not seen before, at least in a very recent modern context. People have been used to living very individualistic lifestyles, particularly in the Western world. So what this full moon throws up for me is a need to realign between what's good for us as individuals and what's good for our interactions with others. It's about finding a nice balance. And interestingly, the midpoint between the two, which is the balance between the masculine and the more receptive femininity of the moon, the sun obviously being the masculine, sees the combination of the midpoint being at 17 degrees in Cancer. So Cancer is very much about feelings, but it's also in the 6th house, which is about health, purity, and obviously health is a key issue in the times that we face. There's also another very interesting paradox about this issue of health. The 6th house is a kind of Virgoan influence, so it's about the need for to be very observant of personal hygiene at this current time, but also it's about being of service to others, being conscious of our impact on others with our own attitudes or amount of organisation we have or lacking of organisation. But weirdly, this midpoint actually forges a beautiful link with Neptune, which in this chart is in the 1st house. We actually have an interception, so the ascendant for this chart is 24 degrees in Capricorn, which you can see means that it's conjunct Pluto. So I think this is a very important feature of this chart. We cannot just focus on the full moon event only. So that ascendant conjunct Pluto. Pluto's about change, it's about transformation, and also, of course, it can be about the underworld, it can be about secrets, and it can be about death, speaking frankly. But what we do have, although Neptune has been very involved in the COVID-19 outbreak, particularly on the acceleration of it, which I think came through the full moon in Virgo, which occurred last month, I do feel in this particular chart we have a lovely trine between Neptune in the 1st house, which is our body, and also the midpoint in Cancer. So that's saying sensitivity and compassion can be rewarded karmically for us all. But also, because of this interception, we have the cusp at 24 degrees Capricorn. The next cusp is at 22 degrees Pisces. So the point that I'm making here is that although we have Saturn, Mars and Ceres all in Aquarius, they're not in their own house. This is because of Placidus. So we've got this big range of planets, or asteroid in the case of Ceres, that go across three zodiac signs. Now, because Pluto and obviously Saturn have triggered the crisis, we could say it's actually our behaviour that's triggered the crisis, because they've been in the sign of Capricorn, and obviously Aquarius is now moved on the 22nd of March into Saturn has moved on the 22nd of March into Aquarius, where you can see he's at 1 degrees. But now we have a conjunction between Pluto and Jupiter in Capricorn. So this change in terms of the things that we've been driven towards for years, this very consumption orientated society, obviously the South Node has also been in Capricorn as it is there. It's reversing backwards, but it did make that conjunction with Saturn on the solar eclipse last July, and obviously an opposition with the North Node, which is more of our directional travel. The South Node is the karma that we're reaping for our actions. So that's preparing, ready to reverse into Gemini on the 5th of May. But what I'm getting here is that this particular full moon is really calling out to us to think about the whole concept of cooperation, balancing our individual desire to be free spirits. The Sun actually forges a lovely sextile with Neptune, and Neptune forges that lovely trine with the midpoint between the Moon and the Sun in Cancer. So Cancer is about nurture, the 6th house about health and hygiene and purity and being of service to others. And Neptune in the 1st house is perhaps a new reality that we need to develop, but we've still got the potential for the destruction of the old order coming through Pluto on the ascendant here. So the 1st house, the ascendant, is the body. So if you like, the Sun is our potential, the ascendant is our body. So the body can still be transformed at this time. So we're going through this huge transformation. Now, we've got some supreme ironies here, because Venus has moved into what I think is the gorgeous Gemini, because it's playful, it's a bit flirty. If we weren't living in such serious times, although there is the retrograde that goes from the 11th of May through to the 24th of June, I think, the 4-month transit of Venus through Gemini, I think for a lot of people would be a kind of rather an uplifting time of a bit more encouragement to be a bit more playful and free. And of course the North Node reversing into Gemini on the 5th of May would enhance that over the next year and a half. I think the real message of Venus therefore now is much more to do with communication, and the communication in this chart is in the 4th house, so that's emotional communication. But I think we're going to see through this Venus position some apps and technologies being developed and injected into this crisis. I've mentioned before, I think, that Oxford University have come up with this amazing technology that they have already applied in Wuhan in China, and it's similar to some modern dating apps where you get to kind of know where other people have been in contact with people who've had it, and then it pings out SMSs to people to warn them that they've been in proximity to someone who's been a carrier, not necessarily a sufferer. This is the critical thing. So they've been closing and closing and closing the bug down. So I think Venus being in the 4th house can be terrific for this kind of communication opportunity. And you can see that Venus forges a wonderful trine to Saturn. So Saturn in the 1st house is kind of like limiting our lives more. It's leading a more simple existence. It's becoming much more conscious of our connection to others. The unity of this COVID-19 crisis is that it means that every person on the planet is in the same proverbial boat, which I just think is so stunningly Saturn in Aquarius. And also Mars is forging a brilliant angle to Venus. So in the 1st house, they're actually, obviously by triplicity, they're forging those trines, but they're in the first and fourth houses, which is interesting because of Placidus, it's not equal house. So it looks a bit odd, but actually terrific links between those two to Venus. So this suggests that there can be a new way of thinking about the structure of our lives, the new way of being as individuals is developing. But then we get the kickback because Mars is actually forging a very virulent and angry right angle to Uranus. Now, I think I mentioned this in a previous video. This actually happened for 5.5 months broadly in 2018 when Mars was stuck at 0 degrees Aquarius for a long time because of a retrograde. It did actually invert back into Capricorn, back into Aquarius, and then repeated the square with Uranus before Uranus itself inverted and went back into Aries. So we do have this clash, and now in this instance, from the first house of Aquarius to the fourth house, in terms of seeing Aquarius as the first house, the Sun. So this could be a limitation. In this chart, it's the third house. So you could say this is a limitation on our ability to move around freely. Uranus is very rebellious, and in the sign of Taurus, it's really pushing us hard to be much more conscious of how we consume resources. So if we embrace this Mars and Saturn energy positively in its angle with Venus, we can come up with more constructive ways of communicating with one another. Technology is bound to be part of this, especially if people are pinned down much more in their own homes through limiting social contact, self-isolation if they've got the bug, and so on. But we could see a new way of thinking starting to develop. Now, when I say new way, I don't mean a new way of thinking for quite a lot of people who are interested in more spiritual stuff, to be honest, which I think might be quite a lot of the watchers of this video. But in the wider populace, people that have been very caught up with consumption might start to think, do you know, this isn't so bad in some ways, that I'm learning some new things. I'm spending time with people that I don't usually have the time to spend time with animals. I may be spending time communicating more with my family. There may be new objectives that are developing. But there's no doubt about it that Neptune does, despite forging this beautiful angle with the midpoint and also a constructive angle with the Sun, it is in a quincunx with the Moon. So a lot of energy in the first house is about the development of our being and our individual ego. So and it's ironic that Mars, which governs those things, is very much in the first house at this time, but thank God it's in Aquarius, which does give us the chance to embrace the higher principles of connecting with others, which is the better side of Aquarius. And also the better side of Capricorn, with this Pluto on the ascendant, is about using organisation, using self-discipline, using a responsibility to others, all very Capricornian and Saturnian energies, the ruler of Capricorn, in a very productive way. And of course Jupiter is about international affairs, and it is about philosophy. We know it's in full in Capricorn, part of the reason for the crisis. But I think, yes, we are being persuaded to change our previous way of being, to embrace this new order of Saturn and Mars in Aquarius, which is about being much more considerate for others, being open to new ways of doing things, savouring and honouring the traditions, which is the rulership of Saturn of Aquarius. Uranus is about the new novel innovations, but these new novel innovations at the moment could jar a little bit. So I think Mars especially and Uranus clashing is about frustration, about being pinned in, and a lack of personal freedom. We could all be experiencing this, but if we can break beyond this, I believe with technology's help, that location of Venus on Saturn and Mars in a trine can be very helpful. Now, the other really fascinating thing is that Mercury, the planet of communication, commerce, travel, and of course travel's been hugely blighted by this crisis, that's in the second house of resources, along with Chiron and Black Moon Lilith and the Sun. So a lot of concentration on what's going on around finances. But actually, Mercury, obviously in detriment in Pisces, and I really don't think that's helped this crisis, is actually in a beautiful sextile with both Jupiter, Pluto and the Ascendant. So new ways of thinking about finances. So for example, central government paying people out to stay safe and stay at home in a way that has been talked about in future generations, and I think it maybe is the Swedish or Denmark or Norwegian government that have been actually thinking about doing this for some time anyway. So it's not a completely novel concept, but now realizing that if we have loads of people who lose their jobs, that the money that circulates in society is going to slow down to such a point that the economy, the wider economy, can collapse beyond anything we've probably seen since the 30s, the 1930s. So I think it's possible that the change agenda, the enlightenment of Jupiter, the change of Pluto on a sextile with Mercury in the second house can see new innovative ways of trying to drive some resources into this crisis. Also, we do have the Sun in the second house, everyday money, and guess where the Moon is? Long-term money. Fascinating. Based on this chart at 3:34 a.m. in Greenwich in London on the 8th of April for the Libra full moon. So Libra full moon on the 8th house is saying to me, we've all got to be coming into a closer relationship with living in a more modest way, that it's okay, that we will get through this, that the rapacious sort of consumerism and materialism and global travel that is not always necessary and has been driving, I've been criticised for, say, global warming, but you know, I've been told it should be climate change. I'm sorry, the seas are getting warmer. So we can have this sort of very sort of consumer orientated society, but the moon is saying in Libra, look, let's balance. We have to modify our desire, which is very much, I think, about the Sun in Aries, because that wants to initiate, it wants to experience things quickly and excitingly. That's a wonderful thing about Aries energy. But the wonderful thing about this particular moon position is, look, it's okay to have a little bit less if we're ensuring that the longer term future for everybody is better. So this chart speaks of a huge potential to bring unity together, but it's not going to be without some compromises. And also, because we have this this quincunx between the moon and Neptune, the first house is very much about individuality. The 8th house is about how we connect with others, and through the prism of Libra, it's about trying to stay in balance with people. So not everyone's going to like this, and Neptune quincunx the moon still points towards the potential for the actual virus itself to be propagating in some ways. But we've seen in China, which is so encouraging, that this can be closed down with extensive testing, proper tracing, proper isolation, and the response in the Western world has been so slow to understanding. You know, at first I think our thought was, oh, isn't it awful that they're ripping all these people out of their homes? And the way it was done was very physical and very brutal and very distasteful. And obviously in a totalitarian society, which at a commercial level is quite free, it's much easier to impose these kind of restrictions than it is in a Western, more orientated society, where freedom of movement and freedom of choice, but freedom comes with responsibilities, of course. So I think, you know, we can see that they've closed it down largely in China. They've done a great job also in South Korea in a similar way by just doing so much testing. The British government, I have to be honest, this is not a political statement at all, have been pathetic. We've got the people who are treating the people who are sick have not been tested, and we've got two British companies that have provided amazing innovative technology that can test people in 10 minutes and pretty well 80 or 90% of the time show that they haven't got the virus. And yet we're not protecting the frontline workers. We haven't given them the kit to actually protect them, the physical kit. There isn't the respirators. This is all coming too late because I feel there's been a kind of arrogance that, oh, well, that's something to do with China. It's nothing to do with us. So their lack of leadership. These are the people who coined the phrase Project Fear about the people who wanted to stay part of the economic European Union. And they're the people who've propagated fear by their complete inability to do just simple things like ring up the supermarkets and say, don't let anyone have more than 2 of anything. This is a government-led initiative, which everybody, obviously some people would have moaned about it, but everybody would have seen the eminent good sense of it. But they bottled it. What does that tell you about the British leadership? A lack of leadership. So, sorry, a bit more of a personal view there, but what we are going to see with this crisis is more and more sort of innovations coming through, which I pointed out on the year 2020 solar return. We saw that Jupiter and Mercury were in a conjunction in a brilliant trine with Uranus. So a drug I take for my rheumatoid arthritis, which is a malaria drug, is already being used successfully to combat this disease. There are some antivirals. There's a Japanese anti-influenza drug invented in 2014, and of course there will be newer technologies coming through. Tests will be done quicker, so there will be a fight back. So I think for a lot of us there has been a sense of dislocation, concern, anxiety, and that is eminently understandable. But I think when we have clear leadership, clear direction that's very grounded, very commonsensical, people will buy into it. When it's a bit woolly, no one really knows what to do. So leaders need to have the courage to lead and not just do the things that they think will be the least unpopular, which I think is what we've kind of been getting to some degree. But anyway, they seem to be catching up a bit more now. So I think the message of this full moon is we all need to come into balance with one another, help one another, develop our humanity and kindness, understand that this is a period of time when we may have to limit our personal freedom. Mars square Uranus, this could be profoundly frustrating. Of course, in a broader context, we do have the Sun and the Moon square Pluto, Jupiter and the Ascendant by 6 and 7 degrees. And I think a lot of astrologers will be focusing mostly on that. But for me, it's more about, we know that the Capricorn energies that built to a point of climax on the 12th of January have been a lot to do with this outbreak. But it's how we move on from it now. So I think it's encouraging in a way that the body that is us has to change with that ascendant on Pluto. It has to. There has to be a new dawn. We have to cooperate more. Saturn in Aquarius. And we know that Saturn's going to move back into Capricorn on the 2nd of July, and it is going to inch back towards Pluto in the autumn, but actually Pluto will invert more in its 5-month retrograde more than Saturn will in its retrograde, which lasts to the 28th of September, I think. But there is so much to go for here. It's a new way of being, less based on consumption, but I think at this stage we have to be aware that the economy is probably still going to be in quite a big headwind, which is going to be scary for any person who wants to know about their employment rights, how secure their business is. This has affected me just as much as it is anyone else. It is a hugely concerning situation, but I do think there'll be innovative measures of pump driving the economies, and I feel that if we can stay calm, come into contact with one another, perhaps mainly by technology in this period of time, but we introduce that technology to pin this horrible infection down, and the strength of personkind to overcome this is going to become more evident as the months go by, and I think you're going to see by the end of May a much more hopeful outlook. But for now, it's been a real honour being with you. If you'd like to join me for that one-to-one, please see the link beneath this video. Or if you'd like to order your personal 12-month personal horoscope forecast based on your time, date and place of birth, and also get your character analysis and 30% off, please see the link beneath this video. Real astrology is going to help us to get through this crisis in a more informed way. And so if you get your charts done, it will help you to know what's going on in your personal situation, which I feel can be comforting as well. But thank you so much, and good luck and goodbye for now.